Hi, it's Emil Guillermo with the PETA Podcast. The Nobels are being passed out to the sciences, and it made me think of all the young scientists out there. Are they making breakthroughs to make science cruelty-free without wasteful animal experimentation? Here's a reprise of our podcast on test subjects, a documentary that speaks to PETA's new ethical science model. We thought this would be a good time to bring you the story of people who saw the light. Scientists who were once animal experimenters who realized the cruelty in what they were doing and simply stopped for the sake of the animals. And then they joined PETA. They are the scientists featured in the documentary Test Subjects. Watch it from the link in the show notes. But first, listen to one of the scientists, Dr. Frances Cheng, describe her transformation. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this behind-the-scenes look at PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. Here we talk to the key players at PETA and the movement and ask them about how animal rights change their lives and how they stay motivated to make the world a better place for the animals. On today's episode, a new documentary by PETA on 3 vivisectors who crossed over to the truth to save the animals. Dr. Frances Cheng still laments what she did to her test subjects.
So there comes a choice, like, should I stay, should I leave? And like I talk about in the film, like, I don't know if I made the right decision, but I chose to stay. And I continued to kill for like a good 3 years, knowing that it's wrong.
Still feel for what you did to those animals.
Yeah. That's the short answer, yes. I think it's really hard to erase those memories. And I also think that just the act of killing and torturing is it leaves a scar on you.
Dr. Frances Cheng, who along with Dr. Emily Trunnell and Dr. Amy Klippinger are all scientists featured in the new PETA documentary Test Subjects. Check out our story notes for links to the documentary. Cheng talks about how she came from Taiwan to the U.S. to be a biologist, but then learned how most of her experiments on animals had little relevance to people. So then why was she torturing animals? Her recognition of that is outlined in an emotional journey that haunts her to this day. When thinking about it, Cheng is often moved to tears, as you'll hear in my conversation with her on the PETA Podcast. So, Frances, we're looking at the film, and what did you think about the overall project? Are you pleased with how it came out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was the perfect length, perfect editing, and perfect storytelling. It's the whole package. I was really happy about how it turned out. I was a little nervous before I saw the final cut because I wasn't sure that how it's going to be portrayed. But I think it came out really well. And
you were crying. I know when we were talking off, before, you said you were a little embarrassed. Why do you think, or why do you say that?
Well, I guess it comes down to how like the society taught us just not to show our emotion most of the time, especially if you work in the science field. You know how they always talk about you have to have this emotional maturity. There shouldn't be, so sympathize with animals and their suffering and all that. You shouldn't cry when you see animal suffering is basically what they're trying to teach you. So I guess I still have a little of that mindset, but I shouldn't be, like it is what it is. I should have those emotions that are true to me, and I'm glad that I get the chance to get it out there and show people how it really is.
Do you really think that was what they were doing when you were going through school? That they were all throughout school, from the elementary, secondary, higher education, in science education, do you think that was really one of their main purposes, to sort of detach and not feel the empathy that you're feeling?
I wouldn't say it's a purpose. I would say that's a requirement. Because if you're so emotional about the process, you wouldn't be able to do it. So they sort of just numbed you through the process, and you started with the species that you're more likely to be detached from. So like, earthworms, fish and shrimps, and then they move it way up to like, vertebrates. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a process of desensitization, and it's something that if you're not comfortable doing it, you wouldn't be in the field. Yeah. So I would say that that's a requirement, basically.
Yeah, but you're saying that it's this inculcation of desensitization.
It is. I mean, it's really ironic, and in one way, like, in one way, you should care because ultimately you're trying to treat an illness. You should have sympathy for that, but at the same time, because the system uses animals, and to be able to do that, you have to be able to be desensitized. Yeah, it's a weird situation that a scientist has to be in. I mean, if a scientist is using animals, that is.
Well, you found this disconnect early on. I mean, you grew up in what part of
Taiwan.
Asia? You grew up in Taiwan, and there's a real sort of touching moment where you talk about how you felt like it was a calling, that you found that dissection was your talent, almost.
Yeah, I sounded gross, I know.
Well, it's not gross. It's just that, some people say, oh, well, I picked up the violin and I started playing a sonata, like from memory almost instantly. Or I started playing the piano. I've never heard anyone say I had a gift for dissection.
I was good with my hands, is what it is. It can be used in many different traits, but like dissection is what I was doing at the moment. But I was successfully desensitized.
Yeah.
Up to the point where I found out that, actually doesn't help nobody.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is, like I said, I've never heard anyone say, I have a gift for dissection. And there you were. And you're a little kid you graduated from college in Taiwan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you felt it was your calling to come clear across the world to the United States to pursue your PhD. Tell me about that big step. How big a step was that?
It's a huge step, like 12 hours time difference step. Literally, like Taiwan and United States, like across, it's the opposite point on the globe. So yeah, it's the longest distance that you can have. Yeah. It's a big change, no doubt. But, I didn't think much of it because a lot of, my friends and all my 3 sisters, they all came to the United States to get their advanced degrees. So it's sort of like normal, where I'm from. Yeah, but it's just, I found my calling actually when I was, in middle school. So I started my training, pretty early, and I knew that, that's what I was doing, that I wanted to do, then. So I went to college with the mindset of getting a PhD. So I jumped the master degree and then went from, bachelor's degree straight to PhD. Yeah.
And that brought you to the United States.
Right.
Now, you mentioned middle school where you found your calling. What was it that you were dissecting? Was it a flatworm? Was it what was it?
There were all kinds. We had fish, frogs, mice, rats, a pig's head that you can get from just the market. Yeah, there are several different species.
And what was your feeling? You were disconnected at that point.
Yeah, I was totally disconnected. I didn't feel a thing. I was just really happy. Oh, like this is neat. It's cool. I'm one of the cool kids that get to do this. It's gross, but yeah, that's how I felt back then.
And then how do you think the animals felt to be in a position so you could dissect them? Did you ever think about them?
So that's the tricky part, because the teachers will prepare the animals for you. So the animals will come to you already anesthetized, so they don't have any motion or reactions to anything. So you don't think about that aspect because you're not the one to put them to sleep.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's how they trick you. Yeah.
They tricked you. Did you? I mean, now you look
if I
back.
was the one who put the drugs to put them to sleep, then I perhaps will think differently. Yeah.
So now, in retrospect, you see it as a trick. But back then, you just said, "I'm smart, Francis. I want to be a PhD by the time I'm 25, and I need to get going with my work." Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you come clear across country. You're now here. What was it that got you that said, "Hey, something's wrong here"?
So I was in the middle of my project, and I had a hard time to make the animals present the same symptoms as humans do. And specifically, we were feeding rats saturated high-fat diet, and we were trying to see if they would do better or worse when they have a heart attack when they're on this diet. So you know how like humans, when you have a heart attack and you continue on this high-fat saturated fat diet, the heart failure would progress worse. But in our rat model, it was the opposite.
Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. You gave a high-fat diet to the rats.
Yeah.
And the rats didn't get worse like for humans. They got better?
Yeah, compared to normal chow. So their normal laboratory diet.
Well, wait a minute. That's the perfect test for the high-fat meat industry.
We weren't funded by any industry, just to be good. But yeah, that sounds like the perfect scenario, right? So yeah. And then the lab was like really surprised by this finding. But so when there's a surprise interesting finding, they get distracted and they would just like go down to try to find the details of the mechanism of what contributing to that phenomenon. They didn't take a step back and think, okay, why is this different from humans? They're just trying to say, oh, like, this is interesting. Let's find out what's making the rat behaving this way. And maybe that can be something that would be useful for the scientific community later on. But they didn't, pause and think, why is this rat behaving better on this high fat diet compared to normal diet when it's the opposite in humans?
Yeah.
And I didn't think of it either until the point when my paper was about to be published and it's going through the review rounds. And one of the reviewers say, well, it's well known that, the rodents, they don't have this particular protein that change the bad cholesterol to good cholesterol, or like shuffling in between the cholesterols. So it's known that rodents can, function pretty well on high-fat diet. Like, so is your finding only applicable to your rats, not humans? It's only until that point that I started to look into the problem.
So, in other words, they knew that missing protein was there and that the rats would feel better with the high-fat diet. They kind of knew that, so it wasn't a real breakthrough. But you noticed that there was a problem when you couldn't replicate it in the mice.
So like, I didn't know that issue, and my advisor didn't know it either. So like, we were in the cardiac field. Like the people who knew this phenomenon are more in the nutrition field. It's like the science is like so segregated. Like many different disciplines. It's not necessarily like the facts are known to everybody. Like you only know it if you look for it, if you study that field. So I didn't know that rats and mice don't have this cholesterol ester transfer protein that would make good cholesterol turn to bad cholesterol when you eat high-fat diet.
But when you realize that, then did you then think about the uselessness in subjecting the rats that you were testing to all the things that you had to subject them to?
Exactly. Yeah, it was like just like a aha moment, like, wow, this is why they behave so differently from humans. They don't even have this protein, that humans do. And why are we using rats and mice? Yeah, it's like the difference is like night and day. Like before I found out about the truth about animal testing, I didn't feel a thing, like I said. But after that point, it's like, I feel everything is like times 10. Yeah.
Is that why you cried?
Mm-hmm. It's sort of like, like when you went from like eating meat to vegan, you can no longer see that meat to be just a meat. Does that make sense? You see a piece of meat on a plate, you see the animal. It's sort of like that, for me with animal testing.
And then when you realized that, what did that make you think about all the things that you'd done previously in the name of science? Or what did it make you think about just the whole endeavor that you were going through of testing on animals and trying to come up with conclusions that didn't really make any sense because they weren't you couldn't correlate what you found with the rats to humans?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was angry at first because I feel like I've been lied to in my whole life by so many people for so many years. And I spent a lot of money and I, flew across the globe to be away from my family, my friends, and to pursue this thing that turned out to be fake. So yeah, angry, very angry at first, but then I soon realized that, all those people who were lying to me, they weren't really lying. They believed it themselves that animal testing is the way to go. They were misled too. Just the system taught them that way, and then they taught me this way. And then I just felt this profound sadness, like hopelessness, even. Like, how do we change this? How do we turn this around? If everybody in this is just, so blind to the truth.
So profound sadness. And that's why you cry.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever get to that point where you think about all the things that you did and that emotional feeling comes out?
Yeah, every time I talk about this, every time I talk about my story, it's the same feeling. That I just can't help it. Like I'm trying not to cry right now. It's almost becoming like a muscle memory now. Every time I talk about it, I cry.
And when
yeah, sorry.
That's all right. And when you think back to what your teachers and all your mentors and advisors were saying, you use the term misled, but were you being misled or were you being, in a way, brainwashed?
Well, I think all the professors that I encounter, they don't intend to lie to anybody or mislead anybody. It's just that they are also a believer of animal testing, and that's what they teach. You can use whatever term that you think is appropriate, but I think they don't have any ill intention when they try to promote animal testing. Like, they really do believe that that is the way to go.
Yet they're believers. Okay, maybe they're not brainwashers, but they're believers. But their actions lead to real harm that can't be justified by science anymore.
They don't see that part. the basic scientists, they stay at the bench. They think that what they produce knowledge, and the knowledge in itself has value, and whether the knowledge can be applied by someone in some way, that's not their responsibility. That's the applicator's job to make use of the knowledge that they produce. So they don't think that, and they don't look at the harm that it causes, because they have this inherent belief that, like, on the scale, it would be a net positive, because there would be some kind of benefit down the road, even though it's not readily measurable.
They just dish out the knowledge and that's it. I mean,
yeah, they produce data. I wouldn't even call that knowledge, because it's pretty much junk.
They produce information that can be debated or can be debunked, but they produce something. They didn't do nothing, but it's nothing coated with, or it's actually, I don't want to say evil, but there is cruelty that's coated with data.
There's definitely cruelty involved, yes.
And so you have just stated their justification. How difficult is it for you to extricate yourself from that world? Because that's the buy-in, right? You got to buy into that world. And now that you've seen the light, I don't know if the light is, you've just seen the creature or the being that you're testing on for what it is, which is a living being. How do you extricate yourself and say, I'm a different Dr. Francis now?
Well, it was just a really hard situation to be in, because when I realized the truth, I was just in the middle. I was nowhere near done with my PhD. I was in the middle of it. So there comes a choice, like, should I stay? Should I leave? You know, and like I talk about in the film, like, I don't know if I made the right decision, but I chose to stay. And I continued to kill for like a good 3 years, knowing that it's wrong. Sorry, you're gonna have to edit a lot of this out, because I just have to pause to myself.
No, the point is, I guess it's clear to everyone who's listening that you still feel for what you did. You still feel for what you did to those animals.
Yeah. That's the short answer, yes. I think it's really hard to erase those memories. And I also think that just the act of killing and torturing is it leaves a scar on you. I'm so glad I'm not on camera right now.
Well, it would have made a better documentary. No, I appreciate you taking the time to talk about this, because it's important, because I think this is what happens when feeling people go into science. They stand up and they try to change it, or they try to let people know what the conflicts are. And the basic conflict is vivisection is cruelty to animals. And as you point out in the film, 95% of the cases in terms of in terms of drug trials, they produce nothing, no real results.
Mm-hmm.
It's this exercise in futility that continues to be funded by the federal government, by all these different, funding sources, foundations, colleges, billions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes someone like a scientist like you who has seen these beings for what they are, for who they are, to speak out. That you have tears of courage, Francis.
Thank you.
I mean, for someone to feel this deeply, I think shows something to people who may be on the fence. Oh, it's just a flatworm. Oh, it's just a frog. Oh, it's a rat, right? How many rats have to go through this process in both research and in regulatory testing?
The real problem of the system is that there's no consequence to the animal data not being applicable. The bench scientists, all they do is they churn out data and they publish papers and they get their tenure. They're safe in their position. There's nothing that can hold them accountable because if the data are not applicable, they're not being punished, even though they are the one who produced it and polluted the literature. And that's why it's so hard to change the system, because everybody in there is just comfortable where they are, and the animal model is the perfect tools for them to get for them to get what they want. They get their prestige, they get their publication, they get their tenure, they get their money. It's a very comfortable position.
Right, and that's why it's important when PETA is protesting the dog labs at Texas A&M, or when PETA is protesting vivisection around the country. The fact that there are no consequences for these vivisectors. I mean, no one says citizens arrest. No one says, no one goes up there.
There's no counter mechanism.
Yeah, unless there's a protest, right? Or really the biggest consequence is if you do bad science. Well, you've said that it doesn't necessarily happen, because even if they do bad science, they take their money away. Or they won't take their money away. So taking the money away would be considered the consequence. But there's some people doing bad science and they keep getting funded.
Yeah, as long as they can get it published. As long as there are journals that will take it. Yeah.
So we had you at mid-career or mid-step in your PhD. You kept going. You got your dissertation. And there's actually a clip of you in the film where you're giving your dissertation. But you wanted to tell me about your dedication. You wanted to have something in the dedication. What happened?
Yeah, so in the written thesis, you can put your acknowledgement, your dedication. There's just a page where you should be allowed to write whatever you want to write. Right? So I had a line, I thank my family, I thank my boyfriend at the time, and I thank my vegan mentors and all that. And there was the fourth line that I initially put in. I think I say something like, for all the animals that I've killed, I'm sorry that I was wrong. And then when I submitted this thesis to my advisor for checkup, he told me that knowing my committee, that line would not go well. That it'll jeopardize my chance of graduation. And he advised me to take it out. And I did. That is prior to the point of me getting my degree. So I had to comply. But when you see that clip where I was actually giving the presentation, that was at a point where I already graduated. That the public presentation was just a formality. That I had already passed my defense at that point. I had already gotten all the approval. And so during my public presentation, I actually get to talk about how useless my thesis was. So I spent the first half of it talking about my thesis, and the second half debunking it. That felt really good.
Well, that's your penance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And And what did your colleagues say to that?
I was met with silence. They were sort of sit there in shock. And my dean, because I had to get his signature on my paperwork afterwards. And when I went there, he's just sort of ashamed, but he said that he understand what I was saying. He agreed that animal data has a huge translatability issue, and but he didn't, he couldn't say anything in the public. He just like privately admitted that is the case, and that he agreed with me. So I got my validation then. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you shouldn't be shamed. He should be shamed for being silent and being a coward in the name of science.
Yeah. Unfortunately, most people are.
But that way, one of the things that you also bring out in the film is that, well, now you work for PETA, and now you can go out there and actually save animals and speak out against animal testing. And tell me about one of the things that you've done that has helped erase the memories of your research.
So one of the good things working with PETA is that we get victories left and right. So I mentioned that I have an Excel file that I keep that tally all the animals that are saved in given cases, and I tabulate it and then calculate against the animal that I've killed. And I think it was last year that I finally reached balance point, and now I'm in the net positive, that I've saved more than I've killed. And those cases mainly come from food and beverage companies that I work with, and getting them to ban animal testing for their R&D, for their marketing and basic research needs. Some of these companies are quite big, and they've done extensive animal testing. So one case would save like thousands of animals, hundreds and thousands of animals. General Mills, Kellogg's, Asahi, is it liquor, Sapporo, Kirin, these are all alcohol companies. Pernod Ricard, that's an alcohol company as well. Yeah, I have about 2,000-3,000 companies. Oh, no.
Wow. And your Excel sheet, you said you were balanced last year, and now you're in net positive in terms of animals saved. So you look back at all your scientific career in the traditional science and in the debunking of the traditional science. How does it make you feel now that you're net positive in terms of lives saved?
It's like a huge weight off my shoulder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you still feel a little guilty about some of those animals that in the past?
Yeah, still. But it'll get better with more victories and, time. I think one of the main reasons that I still feel guilty is that because there's no way for me to know whether those animals that I've sacrificed or that I've tortured and killed, rather, not sacrificed, can understand my decision and whether they will agree to it. There's no way to find out.
Francis.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. People should see test subjects online. Go to PETA.org. There are links there. There are links in our show notes. Francis is just one of the 3 scientists that are featured. We've talked to Emily Trennell before. We've also talked to Amy Klippinger before. Now, we've never talked to you, and I'm really glad that we had this chance to talk about what the animals and what the documentary and how your life in science has evolved for the animals. So thank you, Frances.
Thank you for giving me the chance. Maybe next time I'll try to do better.
You did great. You did great. I mean, people need to see how emotional this is for people. If everyone felt the way you did, we'd have no vivisection, right? We could end vivisection in a day if we all had that feeling. So we have to teach people to get that feeling. How can we do that?
I don't know. I think most people who can sympathize would not stay in the field.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most people...
That's one other thing that people keep saying, well, most scientists support animal testing. Well, duh, if you don't support it, you wouldn't continue to be scientists. You wouldn't stay in the field. So, of course.
That's where they are. They're all there. Thank you, Frances.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Emil.
And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Check out test subjects. Go to the information part of the podcast, and there's a link there. They'll get you to see what that documentary is all about. Also, check out PETA.org for more on the research modernization deal, which is the new ethical science model of PETA. And maybe someday we'll see Nobel Prizes awarded to scientists who make breakthroughs in the ethics of science and do cruelty-free science without wasteful animal experimentation. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to send a link of this show to your friends. Tell them you liked the PETA podcast. You can contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at emilamok. That's EMILAMOK. Or see my vlog at amok.com. Or see my work at Patreon. patreon.com/emilamok. EMILAMOK. Yeah, patreon.com. Yeah, join the community. And get this podcast on YouTube at emilamok1. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe to as well as rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by Carbon Works. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.